They tried to erase Earth from history, but every star remembered our name. The Grand Archive of Vori was a monument to perfect, sterile silence. Its data corridors gleamed with the cold, internal light of processed logic. Billions of informational nodes pulsed in synchronous, mathematical rhythm, a galaxy of captured, categorized, and finalized thought. As High Archivist, Janessa was the living embodiment of this perfection. Her mind was a reflection of the system she curated, orderly, precise, and utterly devoid of contamination. She moved through the central nexus, her tall, statuesque frame casting a long shadow on the polished floors. Her pearlescent silver skin seemed to absorb and purify the ambient light. Her stark, glossy white hair was bound in a severe, intricate braid that fell to her waist, a single concession to form that only served to heighten her functional austerity. Her solid, vibrant sapphire eyes, lacking any pupil or sclera, scanned the primary data stream. Everything was green. Everything was stable. Until it was not. A single node in the nexus flickered. It did not pulse red for corrupt, or yellow for unverified. It pulsed a soft, chaotic white. It was an illogical state. Janessa's focus narrowed. She accessed the node. It was designated Fragment 731 Delta. The designation itself was a void. Species 731 Delta did not exist. It had been purged, its designation locked. The purge had been absolute, executed by the Vori Compact eons ago to cleanse the galaxy of the species deemed a primal, emotional contaminate. The species called human. Her access request met a layer of security she had never encountered. It was not a firewall of logic, but a barrier of aesthetics, a request for resonance. Disgusted by the vagary, she initiated a high-level override. The fragment opened. It was not data. It was not a schematic, a historical record, or a biological treatise. It was a string of phonetic-based text arranged in a fractured, inefficient pattern. Though I am dust and you are stars, the void between us is not far. For in the dark my breath will be the echo of the memory. It was a poem, a piece of art, a vessel of pure, useless emotion. As her mind processed the words, the anomaly spread. The chaotic white flicker jumped to 2 adjacent nodes, then 10, then 1,000. The archive, her perfect system, was experiencing a cascading failure based on a poem. She sealed the nexus and descended. The physical origin of the anomaly was not in the data stacks. The system reported a biological disturbance, a ghost presence, from the deep levels. The unindexed substructures that house the atmospheric processors and waste heat conduits. A place for servitors and maintenance drones. The air grew thick and warm as she descended, an unpleasant humidity clinging to her cool skin. She found the epicenter in a damp, echoing chamber. A single, unindexed life sign. He was sitting on a low conduit, his back to her, watching a trickle of condensation trace a path down the metal wall. He wore the gray, featureless tunic of a deep-level laborer, a caste so low they were not even considered citizens. They were ghosts. He turned slowly, as if he had been waiting. He was a biological impossibility, a living, breathing example of species 731 Delta. His hair was dark and unruly, falling over his eyes. His features were sharp, defined by a strong jawline marked with a faint, pale scar that traced from the corner of his mouth to his chin. He did not look away. He did not show the Vori submission response of lowering his gaze. He just watched her, and his eyes were a deep, startling green. They were filled with an intensity, a depth of something, that she had only ever read about in the most dangerous sealed archives. He was the contaminant, and he was looking at her as if she were the one who was out of place. The observation cell was pure Vori design, seamless white walls, synthesized air, and light without a source. It was a place where variables could be controlled, where contaminants could be studied. Clarke sat on the single slab-like bench, a stark, dark flaw in the sterile environment. He had been stripped of his laborer's tunic and left in simple gray trousers. Janessa watched him through the hardened transparency. She had not reported him, not yet. To report him was to admit a failure in the archive's security so profound it would shatter Vori dogma. A living human. Here. For how long? He was a paradox. The purged species, the primal chaos, was sitting 20 feet away, looking bored. His lean, powerful build was unsettling. It was not the cultivated, symmetrical muscle of a Vori alpha. It was the result of hardship, a body built for efficiency and resilience. He moved with a precision she associated with predators, not laborers. Every motion was contained, purposeful. He rubbed his thumb over the pale scar on his chin, his green eyes scanning the corners of the cell. He was cataloging her sterile box. A Vori guard, a large, impassive male named Leiron, stood at her side. "It has not spoken," Leiron stated. His voice was a flat, low monotone, the Vori standard. "It will." Janessa entered the cell. The door hissed shut, sealing her inside with him. The Vori Compact's official doctrine stated that human proximity was dangerous, that their emotional field could destabilize a logical mind. She had dismissed this as historical hyperbole. She stopped 10 feet from him. The air in the room changed. It was his heat. Vori were cold-blooded, their body temperature matching their environment. He radiated a steady, aggressive warmth. And his scent. It was not the sterile non-smell of the Vori. It was salt, and exertion, and something musky, profoundly biological. It coated her senses. "What is your designation?" she asked. Her voice was perfect, a crisp, cold instrument. He looked up. The intensity of his green eyes hit her like a physical force. It was an active, probing gaze. "You're the High Archivist," he said. His voice was deeper than she expected, and rough. It grated against the smooth silence she was used to. Janessa's perfect posture stiffened. He knew her. This ghost, this impossibility, knew her title. "You will answer the question," she commanded. "I don't have one," he replied. "Ghosts don't need designations. We just need to be overlooked. And you, Vori, are very, very good at overlooking things." "Where did you come from?" "Here. I was born in the shadows you don't catalog, the parts of your perfection that are too dirty to index." He stood. The motion was fluid, a sudden unwinding of coiled potential. He was taller than she had first thought, though she was still tall for a Vori. The power dynamic shifted. He took a step toward her. She held her ground. "You are species 731 Delta," she stated. "That's one of your names for us," he said. He stopped just outside her personal perimeter. The heat rolling off his skin was a tangible pressure. "You call us human, or you did, before you decided we were a rounding error and hit delete." "Your species is a primal contaminate," she recited, the dogma a shield. "You are governed by illogical impulse. You are a biological vector for chaos." He smiled. It was a slow, sharp expression that pulled at the scar on his chin, making it stand out. It was not a pleasant look. It was an expression of grim satisfaction. "And you?" he said, his voice dropping low. "Opened the file." He took another step. He was too close. His scent was overwhelming. Her meticulously controlled respiratory rate hitched. "You read the poem, Janessa." He knew her name. "And now your perfect archive is singing." He was close enough to touch. She could see the faint lines around his eyes, the dark flecks in the green. He was watching her face, her solid sapphire eyes, as if he were reading a data stream. He was looking for a reaction. "What?" he whispered. "Did it make you feel?" The word was an obscenity. It was a violation. Janessa turned, her white braid whipping through the air, and strode from the cell. The door hissed shut, but she could still feel his warmth on her skin and his probing, amused gaze on her back. Contamination. The word echoed in Janessa's mind. She stood in her private sanctum, a space as cold and orderly as the archive itself. She had purged the air, run a level 5 diagnostic on her own neural interface, and still the feeling lingered. It was a warmth in her chest, an accelerated pulse she could not regulate. It was the poem, and it was him. The archive was in chaos. Not a visible chaos, the corridors were still silent, the lights still steady, but the data stream was singing, as he had said. Nodes flickered with the ghost-white light. Files were cross-referencing with the 731 Delta fragment. Reports of emotional resonance and illogical data seeking were flooding her primary queue. The prefect of the archive, a severe, older Vori whose silver skin had taken on a dull matte finish with age, contacted her. "Hi, Archivist," his synthesized voice crackled. "Your data integrity reports are irregular. You have a deviation." "I am aware," Prefect Janessa replied, her voice a model of calm. "I am isolating the corrupted fragment." "This fragment is a 731 Delta marker," the prefect said. "A designation that was finalized, erased. Your inability to contain this speaks to a logical failure. Correct it, or you will be corrected." The transmission ended. The threat was absolute. She returned to the observation cell. The Vori guard, Laron, was still at his post, but even he seemed off. He was watching the human, not the corridor. "His core temperature has risen by 2 degrees, Laron reported. "He is secreting water from his skin." "It's called sweat," Clarke's voice came through the speaker, laced with a dry amusement. Janessa entered, the door sealing her world down to just the two of them. Clarke was on the floor, his body braced against the wall, finishing a set of physical exercises that contorted his body with slow, controlled power. He rose, the faint sheen of moisture on his chest and arms catching the sterile light. He was breathing heavily, a sound she had never heard from a Vori. "You are destabilizing my system," Janessa said, her voice sharp. "I'm not doing anything," he said, wiping his dark hair back from his forehead. "I'm just sitting in your box. You're the one who's falling apart." "The poem, what is it?" "It's just words." "It is a virus, a logic bomb." "No," he said, shaking his head. He walked to the transparency, looking past her, out at the guard. "It's a mirror. It's showing your system what it's missing. You Vori erased emotion, but you didn't erase the capacity for it. You just buried it. You buried it under so much logic you forgot it was there." He turned back to her. "The poem is just a little digging. It's reminding your stars what they're for." "What are they for?" she asked, the question escaping before her logical filters could catch it. "Connecting. What else?" He approached her again, but this time his energy was different. It was not aggressive, it was focused, like a scientist. He stopped a few feet away. "Your skin," he said, his gaze fixed on her face. "It's paler, a flush." She instinctively put a hand to her cheek. Her skin, normally a cool, pearlescent silver, felt warm to her own touch. "Your respiratory rate is elevated. Your pupils, if you had them, would be dilated. Your body is reacting, even if your mind refuses to." "You will stop," she commanded, but her voice was thin. "This is fear, Janessa," he said, his voice soft, almost hypnotic. "Your body is processing a novel stimulus, a threat to your worldview. It's activating a primal response." He took another step. She was trapped between him and the wall. His heat, his scent, the sheer aliveness of him, was an oppressive, terrifying wave. "And this," he said, his gaze dropping to her mouth, "this is curiosity. It's why you keep coming back. It's why you haven't reported me. You want to know what happens next." "I want to know how to stop the cascade," she countered. "It's too late for that," he said. "The question isn't how to stop it. The question is, what will you do when it shows you? When all that history you erased comes flooding back?" He was so close she could feel the air move as he spoke. Her internal chronometer, the perfect Vori clock in her mind, sputtered. Time itself felt thick and slow. "You are the contaminate," she whispered, the words an accusation against herself. "No," he said. His green eyes held her, a predator's focus. "I'm the ghost. You're the one who just brought me back to life." She fled. For the second time, she fled. And as the door hissed shut, she heard him laugh, a low, rough sound that vibrated in her bones. The tremors in the archive were no longer subtle. Data streams flickered with fragmented images, a flash of a massive blue and white planet. The sound of an ancient, chaotic symphony, a text file containing a Declaration of Independence. The history of Earth was not just surfacing, it was clawing its way back into the present. Janessa's sanctum felt like a prison. Her control was fractured. She reread the poem, her sapphire eyes tracing the inefficient lines, the echo of the memory. She felt that warmth again, that ache. It was a sensation of loss, of longing. How could she long for something that never existed? She was contaminated. The prefect's words were a death sentence. You will be corrected. For a Vori, correction meant a mind wipe, a return to pure, cold logic. The thought, which should have been a comfort, was terrifying. She had to understand the weapon. She had to understand him. When she entered the cell, Clarke was waiting, as he always was. He sat on the bench, his hands clasped loosely between his knees. You're running out of time, he stated. He's going to purge you, isn't he? The prefect. How did you know? I can see it, he said, gesturing to her. Your rigid control, it's cracking. You're holding yourself together with pure discipline. That's a very human thing to do, by the way. Who are you? She demanded, her voice raw. A terrorist? A saboteur? I'm a laborer, he said, his face impassive. A ghost? That is a lie. You know the Vori systems. You know my title. You know the prefect. And you know about the poem. You put it there. You are the source of this. He looked down at his hands, a strange, quiet moment that seemed out of place. Then he looked up, and his green eyes were devoid of their earlier amusement. They were filled with a profound, ancient sadness. I didn't upload the poem, Janessa. Lies. The anomaly originated from your physical location. The anomaly did. The fragment, that's been there since the purge. Janessa's mind stalled. That is not possible. All 731 Delta files were incinerated. 99.999%, he corrected. But your Vori ancestors, they couldn't quite bring themselves to destroy everything. Some part of them, the same part of you that is curious, kept a few scraps. They buried them, corrupted them, locked them in a data vault so deep they forgot they'd even done it. A tiny seed of the past. That poem, he continued, is a legacy virus. It's a key, designed by the last humans. It's designed to lie dormant, harmless, until a Vori mind, a very specific kind of Vori mind, accessed it. A cold dread far sharper than any Vori logic settled in Janessa's core. What kind of mind? A mind that is orderly, logical, and obsessed with perfection. A mind that would see a single corrupted, illogical fragment as an intolerable flaw. A mind that would bypass security and override locks just to see it, to correct it. He stood up and walked toward her. He did not stop until his chest was almost brushing hers. His heat was a furnace. The virus wasn't waiting for me, High Archivist. It was waiting for you. The blood drained from her face, leaving her pearlescent skin the color of ash. No. Yes, your obsession with data integrity, your pride in your perfect archive, you are the one who activated it. Your logical, perfect Vori mind was the key that unlocked the cascade. All I did was be here. A living biological resonance to amplify the signal. The twist was brutal. She was not the investigator. She was the weapon. She was patient zero. The contaminate was not him. It was her. You, she whispered, her hands clenching at her sides, have destroyed me. No, he said, his voice dropping to that intimate, terrifying softness. I'm the only one who can save you. His hand came up fast as a predator. She flinched, but he didn't touch her. His fingers hovered an inch from her face. She could feel the heat from his palm on her skin. They're coming for you, Janessa. They're going to correct you. Your only choice now is to feel, to embrace the chaos. I am Vori, she stated, a desperate plea to the dogma. You were, he corrected. Now you're awake. His gaze dropped to her mouth. She was shaking. Her entire body was vibrating with the suppressed pulse of 1,000 illogical responses. He was right. They would wipe her. She had a choice, logic and deletion, or chaos and him. What is happening to me? The question was a surrender. Janessa's voice was a tremor, a hairline fracture in the perfect vessel of her Vori conditioning. She stood in the cell, the sealed door locking her away from the world that was about to condemn her. Clarke watched her. His green eyes were sharp, analytical, but held a new layer. It was not amusement. It was possession. He had waited for this. "You are remembering," he said, "what your ancestors tried to force this galaxy to forget. That logic is a tool, not a god. That order without life is just a prison." "It hurts," she confessed. The admission was a profound violation of her nature. My mind, it is loud." "That's the silence breaking," he said. He gestured to the slab. "Sit." It was a command. She obeyed. The act of submission was strangely steadying. He was the only fixed point in her collapsing universe. She sat, her back rigid, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. He remained standing, looming over her. The power dynamic was absolute. He was the teacher, and she was the initiate in a terrible, new religion of sensation. "Close your eyes, Janessa." She flinched, to be blind in the presence of a primal. "No." "You want to be corrected?" he countered, his voice sharp. "You want them to put you on a slab and burn your mind back to a sterile blank? Close your eyes." Her long, pale lashes fluttered and then settled. Her solid sapphire eyes were hidden. She was in the dark, with only his heat, his scent, and his voice. "Breathe," he commanded. "Not your Vori regulated air intake. Breathe. Feel the air fill your lungs. Feel it move." She tried. Her first breath was a shallow, controlled sip. No, deeper. She inhaled, and it was a ragged, shuddering thing. The loudness in her head spiked. "Good. Now, what do you feel? The physical?" "The air is warm," she whispered. "My skin, it's tingling." "That's your nervous system," he said. "It's not just processing data. It's experiencing. What else?" My heart." "What about it?" "It is fast. It is heavy. It's beating against my ribs. It feels, it's yours," he finished for her. "It's not just a pump, it's an engine. It's responding to the situation, to me. Acknowledge it." "I acknowledge it." "Say it. I am afraid." I am afraid." The words were like acid. "Good. Now, what else?" he pressed, his voice relentless. "I am angry." "At who?" "The prefect. For his rigidity. For you. For doing this to me. And at yourself," he added. "For letting it happen. For wanting it to happen." A strangled sound escaped her. "Yes. This is the chaos, Janessa. This is what you were taught to fear. It's not a poison. It's just more data." He knelt in front of her. She could feel his body heat radiating onto her knees. "You have been living your whole life on a single, flat note," he whispered. "Humanity, we are the entire symphony. We are the rage and the fear, and—" He reached out, his rough, warm fingers tracing the shell of her ear, a place of exquisite, untapped sensitivity. Janessa's entire body seized. A jolt, like a static charge, shot from that single point of contact down her spine. Her back arched. She gasped, her eyes flying open. He was inches from her. His green eyes were dark, fixed on her mouth. His hand remained, his thumb now resting on the delicate point of her jaw. "We are also the desire," he said, his voice a low vibration. "The need, the illogical impulse to connect, to touch, to claim." His thumb brushed over her skin. It was not the chaste contact of Vori. It was a possessive, exploring touch. It left a trail of fire on her pearlescent skin. She was trembling violently, a leaf in a storm. "You," she breathed, "are a monster." "I'm a man," he corrected, his voice a low growl. "And you are the most fascinating thing I have ever seen." All that ice, just waiting to crack. He leaned closer. She could see the faint scar on his chin, the texture of his skin. She smelled him. "This is your choice, High Archivist. Their sterile, logical death. Or my chaotic human life. You can't have both." He was offering her an exchange, her old self for this overwhelming, terrifying, intoxicating feeling. The alert siren blared. Red light flooded the cell, washing his face in blood-colored shadow. "They're here," he said, his hand dropping from her face, the loss of contact a sudden, cold shock. "They're coming to correct you." He stood, pulling her to her feet. "Choose, Janessa. Right now." The red light pulsed, turning the sterile white cell into a rhythmic, throbbing chamber. The siren was a physical assault, a high-pitched shriek of Vori logic tearing itself apart. "They are not here for correction," Janessa said, her mind, sharpened by the new, chaotic fear, processing the alarm. "That is a Class 1 sanctity breach. They are here for deletion." "Even better," Clarke replied. He was moving, his body tense, his green eyes scanning the door, the walls, the ceiling. He was an animal in a trap, looking for the weak point. "What are you doing?" "What humans do," he said, his voice tight. "When logic fails, we improvise." The door to the cell hissed. Not open. It was being cut. A brilliant white light traced a perfect circle in the center of the wall. "They're coming for me," Clarke said. "You're just the collateral damage, the contaminated witness." Janessa looked at the cutting torch, then at him. He was right. The prefect was not just pruning a logical branch, he was burning the whole tree. Her choice was made. She strode to the cell's internal console. Her hands, which were still trembling, moved with new, sharp purpose. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I am Vori," she said. "I know the system. They are cutting the door. They have bypassed the local lock. But they have not bypassed the primary environmental controls. Janessa, the system is designed to contain a biological contaminant," she said, her voice dropping to a cold, precise monotone that was a terrifying fusion of her old self and her new rage. "I am the contaminant." She slammed her palm onto the panel. "Initializing Level 1 Biohazard Protocol. Cell-wide sterilization. Nitrogen flood." A new, deeper alarm sounded. "Warning. Atmosphere is non-viable." "That won't stop them for long," Clarke said, as the cutting torch sputtered and died. "It is not meant to stop them," Janessa replied, her solid sapphire eyes fixed on him. "It is meant to open that." She pointed. A low panel on the floor, one Clarke had not identified, hissed open. A waste recycling chute. A maintenance tunnel. An escape. "You're full of surprises, High Archivist." "You said it yourself," she said, pulling the maintenance cover free. A rush of damp, warm air met them. "I'm awake." The cell door exploded inward. 3 Vori sentinels, clad in black, reflective armor, filled the doorway. They were twice the size of a normal Vori, armed with plasma batons. Leron, the guard, was behind them, his face a mask of cold duty. "The specimens are hostile," Leron commanded. "Neutralize!" Clarke moved. He was not an animal in a trap. He was a viper. He grabbed the heavy metal maintenance cover he had just helped her lift. The first sentinel raised its baton, but Clarke was faster, his human reflexes built for chaos, not rigid Vori formations. He didn't attack the armored sentinel. He threw the heavy disc, edge on, at Leron. The impact was brutal. Leron crumpled. Clarke used the motion to pivot, grabbing the extended arm of the first sentinel. He dropped under the Vori's center of gravity, a move of pure leverage. The sentinel, built for strength, was unbalanced. Clarke drove his elbow into the Vori's unarmored joint, and Janessa heard a sharp, wet crack. The second sentinel swung. Clarke didn't dodge. He met the blow, letting the plasma baton glance off his forearm, burning flesh. He roared, a primal, terrifying sound that echoed in the cell. The sound hit the sentinels like a physical blow. They paused. Vori did not roar. It was an illogical act, and it gave him the half-second he needed. He slammed his head forward, his forehead striking the faceplate of the second sentinel. The armor held, but the Vori's head snapped back. Clarke's hand shot out, snatching the plasma baton from the disoriented guard. He spun, the weapon now in his grip. The third sentinel advanced. But Clarke was no longer just a man. He was a storm of human fury. His movements were precise, contained, and utterly lethal. He fought with the burn on his arm, with the scar on his face, with a lifetime of being a ghost. He disabled the final 2 sentinels in a blur of motion that Janessa's Vori-trained eyes could barely follow. He stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling, the plasma baton humming in his hand. His arm was raw, the flesh blackened. He looked at her, his green eyes blazing in the red alarm light. "The archive, Janessa," he panted. "It's not just a system, it's a weapon, and you just handed me the key." He grabbed her hand. His grip was a vice, his skin hot, slick with sweat. The contact was a shock. "Stay with me," he commanded. He pulled her through the doorway, over the bodies of the sentinels, and into the deep, unindexed tunnels of the archive. The tunnels were a stark contrast to the archive above. They were dark, warm, and loud. The thrum of massive machinery vibrated through the metal grating under their feet. The air was thick with the smell of lubricant, hot metal, and damp. It was the smell of the archive's body, not its mind. Clarke pulled her along, his pace relentless. He still held the plasma baton, but he hadn't relinquished his grip on her hand. The connection was a brand. His heat, his strength, his pained, heavy breathing. It was a torrent of sensory data she couldn't process, only experience. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice breathless. "My home," he said, not looking back. "The ghost's lair, as you'd probably call it." He moved with an unnerving familiarity, taking turns into pitch-black conduits and down vertical service ladders. She, the High Archivist, was completely blind in the deepest parts of her own system. He, the ghost, moved as if he owned them. His burned arm was a mess. The flesh was blistered and weeping. "Your arm," she stated. "The plasma burn requires medical stabilization." "It'll heal," he growled. "Human bodies are good at that. We're built to break and remake. Not like your Vori. So rigid. One crack and you shatter." His words were a jab, but she knew he was right. She had shattered. They emerged into a wider space, a cavernous junction of old, forgotten hardware. In the center, shielded by processor cores the size of shuttles, was a small, cluttered space. A cot. A workbench covered in salvaged tech, a flickering data screen. It was lived in. It was warm. He finally released her hand. The loss of contact left her skin feeling cold and exposed. He slumped against the workbench, the plasma baton clattering to the floor. The adrenaline was fading. His face was pale beneath his dark hair, and the scar on his chin stood out like a white thread. He grabbed a strip of cloth from a pile and began, wincing, to wrap it around his burned arm. Janessa watched him. This was the source of the galaxy-spanning anomaly. A man in a cave of metal tending his own wounds. "Why?" she asked. The question was simple, but it contained everything. "Why are you here? Not just born here. Why are you here now?" He finished tightening the bandage with his teeth, hissing in pain. "My ancestors, they weren't just laborers who hid," he said, his voice tight. "They were an enclave, a legacy. They survived the purge, and they've lived in the shadows of Vori systems for generations, in the deep levels, the cargo holds, the forgotten satellites. We are the ghosts. We are the memory." He looked at her, his green eyes burning with an intensity that had nothing to do with pain. "We knew about the legacy virus. We knew it was seated in your archive, but we didn't know the key. We've been waiting. Generations of us, watching the High Archivists, waiting for the right one. The one with the perfect, logical, obsessive mind. The one who couldn't leave a single, tiny flaw alone. You," he said, "were our prophecy, Janessa." The revelation was staggering. His entire life, his purpose, was her. She approached him. Her illogical impulses were now the only ones she trusted. She reached out and took the bandage from his hand. "You are wrapping it incorrectly," she said. "You will cause nerve damage." He let her. He stood perfectly still as her cool, silver fingers gently, precisely unwrapped the cloth. Her touch was analytical, methodical. She inspected the wound. The heat coming off his skin was scorching. "It is severe," she said. "I'll live." Her fingers brushed the unburned skin of his forearm. His muscles tensed under her touch. She looked up, her solid sapphire eyes meeting his. The proximity was different now. It was not threat. It was not interrogation. It was shared. "You," she said, her voice quiet, "are a truly illogical species. To wait for generations on a hope. It's the most human thing we have." he whispered. His other hand came up. He didn't touch her ear this time. He touched her face. His thumb, rough and calloused, traced the high arch of her cheekbone. Her pearlescent skin flushed where he touched. All this time, he murmured, his gaze dropping to her mouth. Watching you, the ice archivist. So perfect, so cold. I used to wonder what it would take to make you melt. Is that what this is? She asked, her voice barely audible. Am I melting, Clarke? She had used his name. He hadn't told it to her. She must have plucked it from the data stream, from the poem's cascading files. The sound of his own name on her tongue, spoken in her crisp Vori accent, seemed to undo him. Yes, he growled. He pulled her in. His uninjured arm wrapped around her waist, locking her against his hot, solid body. His mouth came down on hers. It was not a kiss. It was an annihilation. It was heat and pain and rough-skinned texture and the taste of salt and exertion. It was a chaotic, overwhelming human act. His mouth was demanding, his grip bruising. Janessa's mind, the perfect Vori archive, went utterly, blissfully blank. She didn't think. She didn't process. For the first time in her life, she felt. She gripped his shoulders, her fingers digging into his skin, and kissed him back. The kiss was a cataclysm. It shattered the last vestiges of her Vori restraint. His mouth was hard, possessive, teaching her a new language of pressure and sensation. His body was a furnace against hers, the heat of his skin seeping through her uniform. She was clinging to him, her hands fisted in his shirt, her entire logical world reduced to this single point of contact. He broke the kiss, but only to rest his forehead against hers. His breathing was rough, ragged. She could feel the pulse hammering in his throat, a primal rhythm against her own accelerating heart. So, he panted, his voice a low growl. Not so cold. Janessa couldn't speak. She was trembling. Her illogical body had taken over, and it was alive with a million new data points. The tingling in her skin, the ache in her chest, the sharp, demanding heat pooling low in her belly. This is desire, she whispered, recognizing the word he had used, but now understanding it with her body, not her mind. This, he said, his hand sliding from her waist up her back, his thumb tracing her spine, is the beginning of desire. His touch was a deliberate exploration, learning the shape of her. His calloused fingers on her silver skin. He was mapping her. The wail of a new alarm, deeper and more pervasive than the last, tore them apart. It was not a localized breach. It was a system-wide integrity failure. Clarke spun to his flickering data screen. It was no longer showing fragments. It was a solid wall of Vori red. The prefect, Janessa said, her mind snapping back, now sharper, faster, fused with her new emotional core. He's not just trying to kill us. He's initiating a full data purge. A purge? Clarke asked, turning to her. He'll wipe the human files? He will wipe everything, Janessa corrected, her voice stark. The Vori archive, our history, the galactic records, everything. He will destroy the galaxy's memory just to hide his one illogical mistake. He is sanitizing the entire system. He'll destroy himself. He'll destroy the Vori compact, Clarke said, stunned. Logic, Janessa said, her voice dripping with a new, cold fury that was far more potent than her old, cold logic. Taken to its perfect conclusion. If the system is contaminated, the system must be erased. There is no room for acceptable loss. We have to stop him. We can't. He's at the central core. It's the most secure place in the archive. Not even I can get in once a purge protocol is initiated. But I can, Clarke said. His green eyes were alight with a dangerous new idea. He's locked you out of the mind? He hasn't locked me out of the body. The maintenance tunnels? The waste heat conduits. They run directly under the core to vent its thermal output. It's a one-way trip. The heat is intense. No Vori could survive it. But a human can, she stated, understanding. You're built for heat. You're built to adapt. We are, he agreed. But I can only get to the core. I can't interface with it. I can't stop the purge. I'm just a ghost, remember? I have no Vori index, the system won't recognize me. But it will recognize me, Janessa said. They looked at each other. The plan formed between them, a perfect synthesis of his chaos and her order. I can't get you to the core, Janessa. The sentinels will be everywhere. You don't have to get me to the core, she said, tapping the data screen. You just have to get me access. The prefect has locked the primary interface, but he hasn't locked the diagnostic terminals. They're in the engineering hubs all around the core. We split up, he said. A statistically illogical move, she noted. The most human move we can make, he countered. He grabbed his plasma baton. He looked at her, his face grim. The moment of intense physical connection was gone, replaced by the tension of the coming fight. If we fail, she said, Earth's history, all history, is gone. Forever. They will have finally won. They won't win, Clarke said. He reached out not to kiss her but to grip her chin again. He forced her to meet his gaze. His green eyes were a promise. They tried to erase us. They tried to turn us into dust. But you read the poem, Janessa. We're not dust. We are the echo, and right now, we are going to be the roar. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. Be safe, he whispered. Then he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the conduit, leaving her alone, her skin burning where he had touched her. The archive was a war zone. The pristine corridors were now bathed in crimson emergency light. Vori sentinels marched in rigid, perfect formations, their black armor absorbing the light. They were moving toward the central core, securing a perimeter against an enemy that wasn't there. Janessa moved against the current. She was a ghost now, too. She used her old Vori knowledge of patrol routes and her new human intuition. She stayed in the shadows, her movements silent, her silver skin a perfect camouflage in the pulsing metallic light. She reached Engineering Hub 3, a sub-level just below the core's main chamber. It was empty. The sentinels were all above, guarding the physical entrance. They had not considered an electronic one, the Vori flaw. They protected the object, not the idea. She accessed the diagnostic terminal. It was still active, a backdoor intended for the High Archivist to repair the system, not to hijack it. Her fingers flew across the console. She was in. She could see the purge. It was a wave of black corrosive data, moving from the outer nodes inward, incinerating everything. It was 20% complete. She could also see the prefect, sealed inside the core chamber, his vital signs displayed on her screen. He was calm. His heart rate was a steady 40 beats per minute. He was methodically, logically destroying a galaxy. Clarke, she whispered, her hand on the console. Now, she could not see him. She could only trust. She began her work, writing a counter-virus, not to stop the purge, it was too powerful, but to redirect it. Meanwhile, Clarke was climbing inside a furnace. The heat conduit was a vertical, circular shaft a kilometer deep. The metal walls glowed a dull, angry red. The air was so hot it was like breathing fire. His sweat was not a cooling mechanism. It was a desperate, failing attempt by his body to survive. He climbed. His burned arm was a symphony of agony. His muscles screamed. His human physiology, his adaptability, was being pushed to its absolute limit. He was cooking himself, but he was climbing. He reached the top, a heavy mesh grate that formed the floor of the core chamber. He looked up. The prefect was there, standing before the massive, pulsing heart of the archive. The core was a sphere of pure, white light, now stained with the black tendrils of the purge. Sentinels stood guard at the chamber's only door. The prefect was speaking, his words broadcast across the archive. The 731 Delta contamination is absolute. The system's logical integrity is compromised. A full reset is the only rational solution. All memory is secondary to operational purity. We will begin again. We will rebuild. This emotional failing will be forgotten. Clarke gripped the grate. No, he growled, his voice a raw rasp. He pulled his plasma baton from his belt. He set it to maximum, the blade extending to its full, humming length. He jammed it into the grate and cut. The shriek of melting metal ripped through the chamber. The prefect and the sentinels spun, their weapons raising. A section of the floor exploded upward. Clarke vaulted out of the hole, a figure of steam, sweat, and raw fury. His clothes were smoking. His skin was bright red. "He's human!" the prefect exclaimed, his calm finally breaking. The word was a curse. "Neutralize the contaminate!" The sentinels advanced. But Clarke was not fighting to win. He was fighting to distract. "Janessa!" he roared. In her hub, Janessa heard his voice. It was time. She looked at her console. She had two choices. Isolate? She could use her counter-virus to grab the 731 Delta, human, files and the Vori files, shielding them in a data vault while the rest of the galaxy's memory burned. A logical, selfish Vori move. Integrate. She could use her virus to seize the purge wave itself, to merge the illogical human data with the logical Vori data, and force the entire system to evolve or die. It was the ultimate gamble. It was chaos. In the chamber, Clarke was pinned. A sentinel had him by his burned arm, its metal fingers crushing the wound. He roared in agony. Another sentinel raised its baton for the final, deleting blow. He looked at the core, past the prefect. He couldn't see her, but he knew she was there. "Choose, Janessa!" he screamed. She looked at the integrate command. She thought of his kiss. She thought of his illogical hope. She thought of his hand on her face. "I choose everything," she whispered. She slammed her hand on the console. The effect was instantaneous. In the core chamber, the black purging data wave stopped. The sphere of light flickered. And then it exploded outward in a wave of pure, chaotic white light. The human files, the art, the war, the love, the history, merged with the Vori logic. The sentinels, hardwired to the archive's logic, seized. They were rigid, their systems overwhelmed by the sudden, impossible synthesis. The one holding Clarke dropped him. The prefect, his mind link open to the core, was hit with the full, unfiltered force of it. He was flooded with eons of human emotion, joy, rage, grief, love, despair. He screamed. It was a high, thin, terrible sound. He clutched his head, his eyes wide. "Illogical! It is illogical!" He collapsed, his logical mind shattered by the contaminate he had tried to erase. Clarke, on his knees, his body screaming, watched as the core's light shifted. It was no longer a cold, sterile white. It was a warm, pulsing, vibrant glow. The stars of the archive, every single node, was now pulsing with the same new light. They were not just remembering Earth's name, they were singing it. The silence that followed was not the cold, sterile silence of the old archive. It was a new silence, one that felt full. It was the quiet of a system processing a profound, new truth. The crimson emergency lights faded, replaced by the core's warm, steady glow, which now flooded every corridor of the archive. The purge was over. The history of the galaxy was saved. The history of Earth was restored. Janessa walked into the core chamber. The Vori sentinels were frozen, statues of black armor, their systems permanently crashed by the wave of emotional data. The prefect was huddled on the floor, his mind wiped clean. The very fate he had intended for her. Clarke was leaning against the wall, his head back, his eyes closed. He was alive, but barely. His skin was a patchwork of burns. She rushed to his side. "Clarke!" His eyes opened. The green was dull with pain, but it was him. "Did we?" he rasped. "Did we win?" "You did," she said. Her voice was thick. She felt that ache again. It was grief for his pain. It was joy for their victory. "No," he whispered, a faint smile touching his lips, creasing the scar. "We did." She helped him stand, his good arm draped over her shoulders. She, the tall, statuesque archivist, and he, the broken human ghost. They were a perfect, illogical pair. They stood before the core. It was beautiful. It pulsed with life. Data streams now flowed with a new purpose. A Vori historical file now cross-referenced with a human painting. A Xylos battle schematic now linked to a Terran poem about sacrifice. The Vori Compact's rule of cold logic was broken. The stars were all remembering. The galaxy's memory was whole again. "What now?" Clarke asked. his voice rough. They'll come for you, the compact. Let them, Janessa said. She was no longer High Archivist. She was something new. A memory keeper, as he had called his own people. I am not Vori, not anymore, not just. She looked at him. His dark, unruly hair was matted with sweat and soot. His face was streaked with grime. He was the most imperfect thing she had ever seen, and the most necessary. They tried to erase you, she said, her solid sapphire eyes tracing the line of his jaw, the faint pale scar that defined him. They believed that emotion was a weakness, a contaminate. And now? He asked. Now, she said. It is our strength. It is the code that saved us all. You didn't infect the archive, Clarke. You completed it. He turned, his body aching, to face her fully. He raised his uninjured hand, his fingers trembling from the strain. He was so hot, a living, human fire. He touched her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone, just as he had in his lair. The touch was no longer a question. It was a statement. What do you feel, Janessa? He whispered. She did not answer with words. She leaned into his touch, a revolutionary, primitive, human act. She closed her eyes, shutting out the new, bright world they had made. She pressed her mouth to his, to the faint, pale scar at the corner of his lips. It was not the annihilating, desperate kiss from before. This was a new kiss. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was the synthesis of the ice archivist's precision and the human ghost's warmth. Everything, she murmured against his skin. The stars remembered, and in the heart of the new archive, so did they.